about the time that I applied to ALA, where it was when I applied to ALA, I wasn't really passionate about what they were selling. It was fixing in myself is like this need for like external validation. Especially as an artist, that's something that can really impact your work negatively. There's as many different ways to be a man as there are men on this earth. You know what I mean? Like, there's no one definition of what being a man is, and I think.
Welcome, everybody. This is AlphaDelta, a podcast where we have conversations with people who are operating at a higher level than most, with the hopes that it motivates and inspires people to become the best version of themselves. So today, I'm joined by Musila Munuve. Musila is someone that I've known for quite a long period of time. He's someone who we went to the same high school together in Kenya, except he was a couple of years ahead of me. And we were also very fortunate to go to the same boarding school in South Africa, except he was many, many years ahead of me, but he was actually one of those people who sort of inspired me to want to pursue going to boarding school in South Africa. So I'm very excited to have him here on the podcast because there's a lot of like very amazing things he's done over the years. But Musila, for those who don't know who you are, could you just introduce yourself, tell them who you are, where you're from, what you do, and what you do in school.
Bro, you're making me sound so old, man. many years ahead of me. No stress.
It's not that many.
Yeah, it's not that bad. It was
really
a couple years.
Yeah, a couple. Yeah.
So yeah, my name is Musila Munuve. I am an aspiring filmmaker from Nairobi, Kenya. Like Joe mentioned, we went to Braeside High School together and then had the privilege of going to the African Leadership Academy together. Yeah, and since then I've done a couple things, but I'm currently pursuing a master's in fine arts in film production at the University of Texas, Austin. And I'm in my first year of that, so excited for what that journey is going to look like.
Awesome. Very good intro. So to clarify to everyone, it's not that many years. It's probably like what, three, if I'm really being realistic, 3 or 4, something like that.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, it's not even that many. So anyway, the first question I have for you is, what are you passionate about and why?
That's a great question. I think I'm passionate about a lot of things. But it's funny because I think one of the things that connects us is African Leadership Academy. And I think around that time is when I started to find that question for myself and like think about what I'm passionate about, and was influenced a lot by the people there. But a short answer is I think just making the world a better place in any way I can. And that's looked different throughout the years. And my connection to that goal has kind of waxed and waned over the years, but I think it's just trying to make the world a better place. And currently I'm trying to do that through art. Before that, I was thinking about that through like a tech lens. Before that, I was thinking about that through like a sporting lens. So just trying to, in any small way, just improve the area around you. I think it's, I don't remember where it's from, but I've always had this saying in my mind of you sweep the street in front of you. Like, if you have a house, just sweep the street in front of you and the world will be cleaner. Like if everybody does that, the world will be cleaner. So I think my passion is just like sweeping the street in front of me and trying to influence the things that I can. Yeah.
That's interesting. No, that's something that I actually I resonate with quite a lot, just trying to just make things better. And I think for me, it more ties towards people, right? It's like, how do you make people better? How do you help people? How do you bring value? I think that's something that, we share that similar passion of like, because, if you're trying to make the world better, obviously you're making it better for people, right? So it's very, very much related in that sense. So, taking a step back, I want you to just tell us a bit about your childhood, what do you spend your time doing? What was it like as young Musila Munuve? What was high school like? Just give us that overall picture of growing up.
Yeah. So my childhood, I think important to say, I was the younger of 2 brothers. And my brother and my family kind of influenced me a lot. So my brother is a very talkative guy. So I was happy to just be the quiet one. You know, when you go to like family settings and they're like asking the kids, okay, so what are you doing? What class are you in? Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Like my brother would kind of answer those questions. I just stand to the side quietly. So I was a quiet kid for the most part.
Yeah.
I think school was something that I did well in. I think I tested well. I was good at testing, so I kind of always skated through school for the most part. But what I actually cared about was football. I played a lot of soccer in my life.
Right.
It was before class, we're playing football. If the teacher leaves the class for any reason, we're playing football with like a bottle top. Lunchtime, we're playing football.
Yeah.
After school, we're playing football. On the weekends, we're playing football. So I played a lot of football growing up, and I think that's influenced me in many ways in terms of how I think about like teamwork, how I think about like exertion, like applying yourself.
Right.
In obviously in like football, it's like a very physical manifestation of just like applying yourself, but that kind of mindset transfers easily to a lot of different things. But yeah, so I was playing football a lot growing up, and I did well in school. So I didn't really care that much about school. It just kind of happened, and I was doing well, so I just like kept doing it until about the time that I applied to ALA, where it was when I applied to ALA, I wasn't really passionate about what they were selling. It wasn't like, oh, I want to change Africa, I want to change the world. Nah, for me, I wanted to leave the house. I wanted to go to boarding school and like leave my home. And I think I'm also a very competitive person, which is also influenced by football. So it was the way it was pitched in school is like, okay, there's only 3 spots for Brayside kids to have like an endorsed application. Like the school would endorse your application and be like, okay, we're putting forward this person. And I didn't get any of those spots. They didn't endorse my application. So I was like, yeah, I think there was like some behavioral stuff that was the issue. So for me in my head, I was like, okay, you're not going to endorse me. I'm going to get in without your endorsement and see
That's like competitive edge.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I ended up getting in. And I think ALA kind of shaped a lot of who I became in terms of like how I see the world I mentioned before, but also just the people I met shaped me a lot, and a lot of really great friendships I've made at ALA, and obviously then helped me go to university, which was a different chapter, and that opened a lot of doors to me and kind of helped me get to the path or the point where I am now. So that's like a bit about my childhood. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. It's a very, very good picture and interesting. I mean, like I think I knew you were quite passionate about football. I just didn't know to what extent. So now hearing about that experience of, you wake up, go to like football before you go to school, football at lunchtime, football after school. That's interesting. It's just like a lifestyle thing at that point. Right. So the next question I have for you is, can you just walk us through how you got to where you are today? Just tell us a bit about your career path. What are some of the things you've done, where you've been? Just walk us through that whole entire journey.
Yeah. So at ALA, I don't really have much of a career, so I guess I'll start in high school. So I started at ALA. One of my counselors recommended that I apply to Stanford, and I ended up getting in very luckily. I think, again, a big part of it is just testing well. So I did well in the SATs. I did well in like my A levels. And yeah, I guess that influenced my application a lot. So I got into Stanford, and Stanford is obviously very tech biased. So I ended up majoring in computer science, but I was always artistically curious, I would say. And for my 18th birthday, my mom bought me a camera because around that time I was getting interested in photography. So all throughout uni, I was taking pictures, like graduation pictures. If there's an event, I'm trying to take pictures. If I worked any job, like I worked at the Black Community Services Center, I would take pictures at like events that they held. So I kind of started to build, at least within the university, a name for myself artistically. And I graduated around 2018, and a friend of mine who is now working in film was working on a short film, and he needed someone to be his cinematographer. And because of my photography, he was like, yo, if you're interested, would you be down to be my cinematographer? And I knew nothing. So he sent me like a couple of YouTube links and things like that. And I was just like doing the YouTube University of how to learn about cinematography kind of
Yeah.
thing, you know. So
Yeah.
I learned what I could. I made like a short like music video, not music video. It was like what I imagined the music video of this song would be.
Right.
And
Interesting. And
like
was that with like stock footage, or were you using like actual like footage that you shot, edited?
yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. So I had a camera at the time, and I just like got three of my friends and I shot the music video over the course of
Right.
like 2 days, edited it myself. And it was just trying to explore this world of cinema. And right after that happened, there was a gap between graduating and starting work. So this that video happened in that gap, and then after like a few weeks after that video came out, or I released it, I was waiting to hear back from like my work authorization. So I didn't get my work authorization. So basically, like, you have to leave. Like, you have to leave the
Yeah.
country. I wasn't deported exactly, but
But it's like,
um
yeah, I know. Yeah.
essentially that's what happened. So I got back to Nairobi, and I wasn't in a very like positive mind space. Like, I had
Right.
this tech job. I was gonna be making a lot of money. Like, I'd already told
Yeah.
my family. Like, everybody was like excited. I had signed a lease to an apartment. Bro, I was
Wow.
ready. I was like
Wow.
set.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then yeah, I had to go back to Nairobi and start to think about, okay, this thing has happened. What can you do? Um, how can you like find your feet here? So I started. My computer science background was in UX design, so I started to look for any UX positions that I could find in the city. And at that time was before like Microsoft and Google and all these places had come, so there wasn't as much of an appreciation of UX design in
Right.
the city as there is now. So it was mostly like design agencies, and for the most part at that time it was like brand design agencies. So there wasn't much work.
Right.
Um, and then I found this company called Arc Africa,
Mhm.
and Fadi Rostam, who ended up being my first boss. That guy is a genius. You should actually, if you're going to interview people, I think you should
Yeah.
interview Fadi,
Yeah.
because
Make the
he's an
link.
incredible guy. No, I will. I will
Okay.
actually. So I met Fadi, and I started working at Arc, and I worked there for a couple of years. And that kind of launched me or helped me in my journey towards film, because design and film it's visual communication for the most
Right.
part. Like,
Yeah.
if you're designing a website or you're designing a logo, you're trying to communicate something visually. And if you're
Right.
in a film, if you're thinking about costume, if you think about color, you're just trying to communicate some piece of information to the audience visually. So it got me to practice my visual eye and visual thinking in a like 9 to 5 space. But aside from that, I was trying to do photo shoots whenever I could. I was trying to do video shoots. I did like 2 music videos for just my friends, nothing too crazy.
Right.
Um, and then around the time of 2020, like around the time that COVID um, became a thing in like people's wider consciousness, and we went into quarantine, I basically had all this time on my hands, because
Right.
I wasn't going out, I wasn't doing any of the things that I was used to doing. So I just had all this time on my hands that I started watching like a lot of film, and I started writing. So I wrote a script that was inspired by Frank Ocean.
Mm.
I'm really inspired by music in a lot of the work that I do. So it was a
So,
script that was inspired by Frank Ocean, and I kind of went through the process, just like, again, YouTube University, how to write a script. I wrote it,
right.
and then like, how do you cast actors, and I wrote it. And um, it's it kind of grew throughout quarantine, and then as we started to open back up and I got to work, it was hard to develop the script and develop the movie. Like, after work,
Right.
you come home from work at 5, you're tired, maybe you go to the gym,
Yeah.
you come home, you don't even want to think, you just want to like
Yeah.
put on
For
something on the
sure.
TV and sleep. So it kind of took a back burner, and then I think I eventually made the film in, I want to say, August or September of 2021.
Mhm.
So that was like a year of it just like sitting in my drafts. Um, so I went through the casting process, like the rehearsal process, and then over 2 days I shot it with just my friends. I reached out to my friends. I was like, "Yo, can you help me like do behind the scenes photography?" Like, Stephanie Matu did
Right.
the behind the scenes photography. My girlfriend at the time did like the lighting and the sound with me.
Yeah.
Um, so it was just like a very in-house kind of thing. And that film ended up being what I used to apply to film school with.
Interesting.
So I applied to film school. That was actually the second time I applied to film school. I applied to film school in 2019 when I got to Nairobi. And I got in, but I didn't have the money to go, basically. They didn't have any scholarships for me at the time. So this time around, I applied to like a wider range and schools that had a bit more funding available. And with this film, I ended up getting in. And yeah, so I've been in film school since August of last year. And that's kind of where I'm at now. And yeah, so far film school has been, I think one of the reasons I wanted to come to film school was to have the space to make mistakes. Because I was making films in Nairobi, but there's no space. They didn't feel like there was space for failure. You know what I mean? It's like you're coming home from work and you're putting your own money into this. You're putting other people's time into this. It doesn't feel like it's a place where you can really experiment and try things. You feel like you have to, if you're doing this thing, one, it has to be financially viable for it to justify the time that you're spending on it. And two, you just don't have enough time to make things often enough that you can fail and try again and fail and try again. So the thing I really wanted from film school was the space to fail and also the community around me. So in those aspects, it's been great because in the first semester alone, like you make a 30-minute documentary, which I made, and I can share that with you at some point. And aside from that, you're making things every week. You're writing a script every week. You're making like a cinematography project every week. So this kind of quick turnaround and feedback process. We talk about this all the time at ALA. It's like what is it? Something practice, deliberate practice.
Deliberate practice. What you're doing. 10,000 hours.
Exactly. So it kind of, I was doing it anyway through YouTube, and a lot of the information, honestly, that you're learning in film school, you can find on YouTube, but the things that you don't have are the space to make these mistakes in like a environment that's there's no financial pressure, and also you have the community that can elevate the work that you're doing, because the people who are in film school with me are helping me with sound, with cinematography, with editing, whatever, and that's a huge boost to the work that you do. So yeah, I'm currently in my second semester of film school, and so the first semester you make a documentary, and now I'm working on a narrative film. So it's going to be about 5 to 7 minutes, and the film is about grief and migration and like what it means to be African abroad, or like one piece of what it means to be African abroad. So yeah, I'm excited about that.
That's interesting, man. It's very exciting stuff, man, for sure. I think what I really picked up from your story is just like this need to be resourceful. I think your whole experience has just been like, you know, from you tapping into like YouTube University a lot, tapping into your friends, just basically trying to be as resourceful as possible. Very well knowing that you just didn't have the resources to like you said, you know, devote a significant chunk of time to just like develop a film and like, you know, hire the most expensive equipment and all that stuff, right? And I think that's like a really, really, really good like advice or insight for anyone who's listening, is that like, you know, you just have to be like resourceful at the things that you're trying to like, that you're passionate about, that they're trying to develop, right?
100%. And I think use your community. I think a lot of people, when you think about networking, you think about like connecting with people above you. And I think people talk a lot more about like horizontal networking and just like tapping into your peers, because those are the people who know you the best. Those are the people who probably understand your vision the best. And there's a lot of value there. So connect with the people who aren't like above you necessarily, but like beside you.
No, I agree. That's actually really important. Like I always see it like, you know, the ones that are around you, you can see them as like your tribe. These are like your people who are like, you know, they got your back. They hold you accountable to some degree to what you say you want to do, and they're there to support you. At the end of the day, when you have a good circle of people around you, you know, they want to see you succeed at anything that you're trying to succeed at, that is. So the next question I have for you is, you know, what has been one pivotal moment in your life that has shaped your career? And the follow-up question to that is, what has been the greatest achievement in your career so far?
Um, Pivotal moment. I think probably not getting the visa, the work authorization, because I think if I had gotten the work authorization, I'd have gotten my tech job and like been making money, and there would have been no reason for me to look inward. Because when I didn't get the visa, I came home, and one, I was working a design job and I wasn't making that much money.
Yeah.
When I think a lot of entry level jobs in Nairobi, we've all heard the stories, it's like
Yeah.
it's tough. So you're not making much money. And at the time I wasn't really enjoying like UX design or like computer science that much. And for me, I think if you're working a job, it should either be making you like a decent amount of money or should be making you happy.
It's true.
At least aspirationally, those are the two things we should look for. Not everyone has a privilege to kind of make that distinction. But for me, it wasn't either. It wasn't making me money and I wasn't happy. So I was
Yeah.
like, okay, why am I doing this? And it forced me
Right.
to think about what I actually wanted to do. I was like, okay, if I'm going to be, because I'd always thought about art, I was always curious about art, but I think especially when you go to these like prestigious institutions, people are like, oh, you went to ALA, you went to Stanford, you should be doing something X, Y, and Z. You should be doing something like impressive.
Right. Right.
You should be doing something that makes you a lot of money. So I was thinking, okay, if I become an artist, it's gonna be rough for a long time. I might not be making
Yeah.
money for a long time. I'm going to be there's a big possibility, especially in Kenya, if you're an artist, that you're going to be broke.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, if I'm going to be broke anyway, if I have this computer science degree and I'm not making much
Yeah.
money,
Yeah. As
I'm broke
is.
anyway. So I might as well be happy. So I started thinking about
Right.
actually what are the things that are making me happy and what can I do that will fulfill me in the long term. And that's when I started thinking about film seriously. So I think that's probably the pivotal moment for me. What was the second question? The second half of the question.
What has been the greatest achievement in your career so far?
Um, the greatest achievement. I don't know. I think again, this is another way I'm influenced by football, but people always, if you look at football players, you always look at the last match. It doesn't matter if you've won the World Cup, if you're this and this person. Like
Yeah.
Ronaldo has been a a great player for a long time, but now he's playing in
Right.
Saudi Arabia. People forget about all of that. So I think the greatest achievement is always the last thing that you've done. And for me, that was the documentary that I released. So um, at this point, I think that's probably my biggest project as an artist. It's a 13-minute film, which is longer than anything I've done or released before. And I think documentaries are very difficult to make because there's there's a much smaller scope of control. Like there's much less things you can control. Like with a film set, you can control the light, you can control the schedule, you can control the sound. With a documentary, you're literally with your camera and your mic, and if there's a sound happening outside, you can't tell the guy to stop blowing leaves. You can't
Yeah.
like change the lighting in someone's house necessarily that much. So there's a lot less control over what you're doing. So I think the fact that I made a documentary which is outside of my comfort zone and it screened pretty well. I think it got pretty good response from the people who saw it at the screening here at school. Is probably my biggest accomplishment thus far.
That's awesome. That's really, really cool. So the next question I have for you is, what is the biggest challenge you ever had in your life and how did you overcome it?
Um, I think the biggest challenge is a continual one I've faced since I was a kid. So I talked about like being quiet as a kid.
Yeah.
I've always been very shy, and I think that comes from a point of being self-conscious about perception, about people's perception.
Right.
And I think that's something I've been on and off and with like different levels of intention working towards fixing in myself is like this need for like external validation. Especially as an artist, that's something that can really impact your work negatively. If you're listening to everybody's feedback, if you're trying to make everyone happy, you make something that doesn't really mean anything because there's not one thing you're saying. You're trying to say
Right.
everything for everybody all the time. So I think trying to fix this need for external validation has probably been my biggest challenge, not just in like my career, but in terms of my life as well. It's something that I've been working on, and it's probably something that everybody has to some extent.
Yeah.
I think humans are social creatures.
Right.
The feeling of being in a tribe, you want people to appreciate you and like appreciate your work. But I think there should be some boundaries around what that looks
Right.
like. And it's a good thing sometimes, you know. I think it's kind of what keeps people in check sometimes. If you have
Yeah.
no care or regard for the people around you, that's also not a positive thing. But I think there should be like boundaries around what that looks like.
Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, like that's something I can relate to a lot. I mean, growing up in high school, I think that was something that I definitely had a challenge with a lot of the times, of that thing of like always trying to be, accepted, trying to be, you do all these things of like, for lack of a better word, I guess people pleasing in a sense.
Yeah.
And it's like, and sometimes you do it in a way where it becomes detrimental to your own, like, your own values or your own interests, right? So my question for you is like, now that you're in this phase of like, it's like you're constantly trying to work at this, like, how do you approach it? Like, what sort of like principles do you put in place? How do you essentially think about tackling the issue?
Yeah. There's a couple of ways. I think number one is therapy, honestly. I think everybody should go to therapy. I've
Yeah.
been in therapy like on and off, just because of like insurance and things. Right now, I'm not in therapy, but I'm looking for a therapist. I think having someone who is trained to kind of think about these things and is sitting outside of yourself, and can help you just shift your perspective on the things that you're doing and the things that you're thinking is helpful. So I think therapy is number one. I think number two, just in terms of my own thinking, like reading on the subject, I think validation is something that everybody needs, but the way you find it is important. So it's like if you're getting your validation from other people, that's like a very fickle thing. And depending on your environment, the things that people validate are going to be different. If
Right.
you're in Nairobi versus in California, the thing that people value are going to be different. And you find yourself
Right.
changing just because you're looking for that validation. But if that
Yeah.
validation is internal, if you're looking at, okay, what are my hobbies and how do I get validation from that? What are the things that I give back? And how does that impact me? How am I what is my relationship with my family? What is my
Right.
relationship with myself? Like how I think, speaking of like, because you work out a lot, I think that's like a good sense of validation, because in the gym it's like it's about progression.
Right.
It's about like continual progression. It's like, okay, all this other stuff might be going on in my life, but I hit a PR this week. Like I added
Exactly.
5 pounds to this week, and that's like an internal validation that nobody can take away from you.
Right.
So yeah, I think just things that you can do for yourself that can provide validation are important.
Yeah. I think that's a very, very important thing that you just mentioned, and very, very, very key insight actually. It's like you just spoke a lot about just like, values, like understanding what you really do value and what brings you validation. I think even for me, like over time, I've really gotten very, very focused and dialed in as to what those things are. Like I always tell people, like, I don't care about a lot of things, but there's a very small set of things that I do care a lot about. And for me, that's like really just like, faith, my family, fitness, and finances. Like it's funny, I've actually got that from someone else, but like essentially they put it in the best person. But like for me, it's like that's the one area where I know like that's where my focus is and attention is, and everything else beyond that, it's just like I just take it all like it's a joke, right? Okay, not really a joke, but it's all just like not as serious to me, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, like you said, just having that, knowing like what you really value and what's really important to you just really helps with just making sure that you don't fall trapped to just always seeking validation from things that don't really matter to you at all.
100%, 100%. I think what you said about the values is, I definitely didn't say that. That was you, but I agree. I agree with it for sure. I think having things that are well defined and taking the time to define those values for yourself is important. Yeah, 100%.
All right. So Musila, you were just telling us a bit about, what are some of the biggest challenges you've had and, how you're currently overcoming them. So the next question I have for you is, what advice would you give someone who's trying to do the same things as you?
Yeah, I think make as much as you can and watch as much as you can. I was taking this class and they were talking about Richard Linklater, who's one of my favorite filmmakers, and he said when he was in like his films, he didn't go to film school, but he like created a film school like curriculum for himself, and he just watch a bunch of films. So he'd watch, he said 3 films a day, something like that. So just watch as much as you can so you can understand the film language. I think, okay, so there's a caveat to that. I think if you're watching a lot, obviously there's a lot of bias towards like Hollywood and Western cinema, but you kind of have to understand those rules if you want to break them, some would argue. But also like making sure you're watching a lot of African cinema if you're an African filmmaker. It's interesting being in film school because you kind of have to do like double study. You have to like, okay, you're doing the classwork, but also you're trying to learn. If you're doing film history, you're like, okay, I'm doing your classwork, but I'm also trying to learn African film history because I'm not going to get that from you.
Right.
You have to kind of learn everything that you're being taught, but from an African perspective as well. So you kind of have to go outside of classwork to do that work if you're in film school, I think. So I think always contextualizing the things that you're learning, but also just making as much as you can. I wasn't good at this because I was doing the 9 to 5 thing and I didn't have the bandwidth, honestly, to make too much. But if you can, just make as much as you possibly can, like as many short films as possible. If you can get on a set and see what a set looks like, that would be sick. Because I never worked on a set before coming to film school. I only got to be on set this last semester. And that completely changed the way I see films. So if you can get on a set, do that. Yeah, I think, again, finding your community, finding people you can collaborate with, people who can workshop your scripts or your edits, things like that. So
Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So what I'm getting from you is, one, just the community piece. That's very important. And then just like, make as much as possible and like, could you basically just indulge yourself in whatever, in the craft, right? Just get obsessed, essentially. Yeah.
Indulge yourself in the craft and also indulge yourself in the study of it, the study of the past work and the work that you're trying to make. Because you kind of have to build your taste as a filmmaker. What are the things you like, the things you don't like, etc.
Right. And you only get that from just getting exposed to a lot of different types of content, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Makes sense. All right. So the next question I have for you is, where are you heading to? Like, what are some of the things you're hoping to accomplish in the next couple of years?
Yeah. So obviously I'm in film school, so I'll try to graduate at some point.
Obviously.
Yeah,
First priority.
that would be sick. If I can graduate, my parents would be very happy, I think. So that's number one. But number two, just leave film school with films that I'm proud of. I think standardly people go to film school and you want to get into film festivals, you want to get like feature-length films made afterwards, and that would be dope. I think I've said this a bunch and we've said this a bunch, but just like make community and make connections like in film school, but also while I'm in the States, which I don't think will be forever, creating community that I can work with in the future and who inspire me is also really important to me. Yeah.
Nice. That's very cool. All right. So the next set of questions are a bit more personal. And the first question I have for you is, do you practice self-improvement? And if you do, what do you do?
Yeah, man, I think I tried to. So I'm also into fitness, trying to get into it. So I do that a lot. I play football a lot. I'm always trying to improve with no goal in mind. I'm 28 at this point. I'm not going pro. Like always trying to get better. I think in everything I do, I'm trying to get better. There's this quote I really like by Arsene Wenger, who's a former Arsenal manager.
Mhm.
He said, "The goal of anything in life should be to do it well enough that it becomes an art."
Right.
And
Oh,
I
that's
always think
nice.
about that, which is if I'm doing an interview, how can I do it well enough that it becomes an art, like the way I'm segueing from topic to topic? Or if I am dressing, how can I dress in a way that like expresses who I am, was like artful? Um if I'm like maintaining relationships across borders or like across oceans now, how can I like maintain those in the best way possible? So I think for me, self-improvement is I try to practice it in everything that I do. If I did this or this isn't working, how can I improve upon that? So I think I'm always trying to improve.
Right. That's interesting. I like that. I like that. I like that quote. That's a very nice quote, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, the next question I have for you, I know you sort of did touch a bit about it previously, but I'm just gonna ask it just in case you might have a different response. So the question is, what is one area of your life you feel you could improve on?
Yeah, I think definitely being being better at practicing self-validation and not being influenced by external validation as much. Um, I think that's something that I've been working on for a long time. I think I'm still far away from where I want to be,
Right.
but definitely going to therapy and um, just like again creating these values and these ways of validating self. Um, like if I'm in a space where I don't feel validated by my surroundings, what are the things that I can look to in myself and be proud of? And those are the things I'm constantly trying to be working on or looking for. And I don't think it's ever going to be something I'm like, okay, I'm at a point where I'm happy
Yeah.
with where my validation is coming from. I think it's for me at least it's going to be a lifelong journey, and that's okay. I think finding joy in the process or in the journey, whatever, is kind of the move with this one. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it makes sense. And actually, I mean, is that like, I guess, adage where they always say, like, the journey is always better than the destination. It's like the
Mm-hmm.
pursuit of something is always like much more valuable than the actual thing that you end up
Yeah,
accomplishing. So yeah, that's
absolutely.
very, very interesting. So yeah, the next question I have for you is what does being a man mean to you?
Yeah, this is an interesting question. I don't know. I think that's a very interesting question. I think masculinity and femininity are things that I've thought about a lot, and I want to read more about because I
Yeah.
don't think I have an honest answer for you in this question because
I can swing you some
I
books,
think
man. I can swing you some
yeah,
books.
because I think masculinity is okay, ideas of masculinity and femininity have been taught in a way or socialized in a way that I think have been toxic in the past. And I think those have kind of seeped into every expression of what masculinity and femininity is. It's like people say, oh, femininity is nurturing or whatever. It's like, is that really true? Has that been the case for all cultures, all societies? Or is that just what we've kind of equated to femininity? Like what is if we equate that to femininity and we said all women are feminine, what does that mean about like women who aren't necessarily naturally nurturing? Or if you said being a man is like being a protector or being like um a provider or whatever, like what does that mean for like what does that do to the psyche? What pressures do those add to men, and how are those positive or how are those negative? Um, I think I guess the short answer to that question is being a man at this point is questioning gender and the idea of gender and what are the positives and negatives of how gender has been enforced and interpreted in society. For me, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm curious to hear your answer, actually. Sorry to turn the interview around.
It's
I'm
fine.
curious
It's
what you would say
fine.
to that question.
How do I start? I mean, so I have actually done like, and I'm constantly trying to learn just like and understand, you know, because like let's abstract like man and woman, right? Let's just abstract and just look at the energies. I like how you brought out masculine and feminine, right, from the onset, right? And something I'm really get to deeply understand, like from the core, is that like every human being has both masculine and feminine energy in them, right? I actually put out a post about this, and I actually got like a lot of very good feedback. And essentially, my post is just basically saying like we all have both masculine and feminine energy, and like the masculine purpose of the energy is like to work, to strive, to achieve, to lead, etc. Right? That's like the masculine energy, right? And like the feminine energy is like to nurture, to love, to care, those sort of traits, right? And these are things that you can find in both men and women. Like now, what changes is that like every individual has like a factory setting. Like you have a core, like something that is unique to you, and that's what you more or less gravitate towards. It's what typically you tend to prioritize in your life. So if you're someone who prioritizes a lot of like your work, things that you're passionate about, always trying to accomplish things, and you find the most fulfillment in that, then you can say you have a more masculine core. But if you're someone who you value more relationships and trying to build love, and you gain a lot of fulfillment from that, then you have more of a feminine core. And that puts aside the gender, right? It doesn't matter if you're a man, woman, or whatever other type of gender you are. Like it's all about just the energy that you have at your core. So that's sort of what I've come to understand. Obviously, because of just the age we are, they sort of abstract and sort of box in, saying that masculine energy means that you're a man, and they mainly point it towards being a heterosexual man, and feminine energy is as you're a woman, right? But really, like, no, you have people who have, you could be a man and you have a lot of feminine energy, and you could be a woman, you have a masculine energy. And the book that I was going to check is saying you like it talks about it from a very heteronormative perspective, but I still think like the insights are actually quite interesting, which is why I got a lot of the way I think about it. Because when you think about like relationships, for example, right? Both masculine, like these are opposites and they tend to attract, right? So to some degree, yeah, they agree to some degree, right? So like it's like, to give an example, like it's quite rare to see a very masculine individual together with a very masculine individual, if that makes sense. Because like in a intimate setting, right? Yeah, let's not get too much caught in the weeds, but anyway, so point being, I see it more from a point of like from energies, like about masculinity and femininity. Unfortunately, because of this, the society we're in, like, I mean, what it means to be a man, most cases we're talking about what it means to be a masculine man in most cases, right? And in that situation, then that's when if I'm looking at it from that lens specifically, then I say, okay, in that lens, you look at things like, okay, responsibility. I think that's like a very key thing, right? For a lot of masculine men, like you take a lot of responsibility and ownership about who you are, your actions, all those sort of things, your life. I think it's also a thing about leadership. So leadership, not only just like, it's both leadership vertically and horizontally. So, like, are you the sort of like masculine man or masculine individual where you're an inspiration to the people who are around you, or like you lead the people around you, as well as, below you, and you try to lead people above you. It's like across the board, in all axes, right? And yeah, then of course this is where things get a bit blurry, where there's always those like very traditional ideologies of where, like, a masculine man is like a provider, a protector, those sort of things. But yeah, in a very long-winded explanation, but like, I mean, for me, I'm still discovering a lot of it. I mean, I think also just how like what I've been exposed to growing up has also had a very, very huge influence. Like I've grown up in a very, I guess, traditional home to some sense. Where like my dad was a very masculine person, my mom was very feminine. And obviously from that perspective, that sort of influenced my view on things, plus also doing my own reading too. So yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think the thing that probably resonated the most from what you said is like everybody has a factory setting, everyone has like a different base level that they come from.
Yeah.
And I think for me I think I'll revise my answer and say that being a man there's as many different ways to be a man as there are men on this earth. You know what I mean? Like there's no one definition of what being a man is. And I think because I think that the danger with saying, for me, with saying a man is like the ideas of equating manhood with leadership or with responsibility is a kind of, if you're again looking at these things as opposite, it kind of creates these neural pathways or these stereotypes that, okay, if you think leader, you think man. And what are the consequences of that when you're looking at like implicit bias in like, okay, hiring processes or like politics or just like even interpersonal relationships on a day-to-day. So I think for me, my answer is that there's as many ways to be a man as there are men, you know, and there's no one way to be a man. I think what you said about like the factory setting, everybody kind of having a different way of interpreting gender and interpreting these things is probably where I land. And vice versa, there's as many ways to be a woman as there are women. So I think that's kind of probably where I would want to land on that subject.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a very complicated topic to be talking, especially nowadays.
Yeah.
But I think these conversations are important for a lot of people, because I think a lot of people are very they sort of have the inclination that like something doesn't feel right, or something like, you know what I mean, like some sort of like almost like some sort of like almost identity crisis, right? Just because of just the climate we're in these days. So having sort of conversations very openly about like, okay, what does it actually mean from a intro perspective, and not really like looking at what is out there that's telling me that this is the definition of what it means to be like this and whatnot. So very, very important. Yeah. Cool. All right. So the next question I have for you is, what does Alpha Delta mean to you?
What do you mean by that?
Well, I gave you the pitch about the podcast. I'm hoping you've seen a couple of episodes, like, based on all of
I've
that.
seen some clips on Instagram and stuff.
Yeah.
I think the idea of people who've like achieved certain things and using that to inspire others is something we do on a day-to-day basis anyway. Like we will look at the people who are doing the best at our field and try to replicate the things that they're doing. So I think having like a way of being able to tap into those people in like a content way is helpful,
Right.
like just like hearing about people who are maybe like investment bankers or like management consultants, like that has nothing to do with me, but I think the ways that the things that we think about or the things that have led us here may be similar, or like the values or the processes are maybe similar. So I think for me, it's a way for us to connect with and inspire ourselves by looking at the things that people have done. So yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. All right, man. I mean, we're pretty much coming towards the end of this episode. Do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, I guess 2 questions. You might have talked about this before, and forgive me if you have, but I'm curious why, like at what point did you decide to start the podcast? Like what was it that were like, because you probably thought about it for a long time before you're like, okay, I'm actually going to do it. So what was the point you were like, okay, enough is enough, I'm going to record this podcast? And I guess what is what does the future look like for you in terms of the podcast? Like, where do you see it going, and what are the things you wanted to do?
Yeah, for sure. Great question. I have got this question a lot, but like I still enjoy answering it. So for me, I think it actually a lot of these things sort of happened. Not even some people some people explain like, oh, things are very calculated and whatnot, but like sometimes it really just doesn't happen that way. A lot of it has just been like just doing things and just rolling with it. Because I know for me, it actually stemmed from me wanting to first start doing a YouTube channel, right? And the idea for this came to me in like 2019 initially. So I was like, all right, I'm going to do a YouTube channel. So what I used to do is I would record like short videos on my phone, but I'll just never put them out, right? I'll just like, those sort of like diary logs for myself. And I was like, one day I'm going to put these out and whatnot. And then when I came back now to Nairobi, I was like looking at some of these diary logs and I was like, wait, like a lot of the things I was talking about is just around like self-improvement. It's something that I'm very, very passionate about, something that I like sort of started in like since 2014. So all these years have just been like years of just like gaining a lot of knowledge, experience, reading books, trying different things. And now I came to a point where like over the years, like it always has people ask me like, oh, like, you know, I see you always so focused, you're always so like, you have a very strict routine schedule, you're always doing all these things, like how do you balance, how do you know, they always ask me all these questions. I'm like, you know, like the best way I can actually be of service to people and help out is just putting out this information out there, just from my own perspective. So it started out with just the YouTube channel, just like around self-improvement, just putting out videos, just sort of sharing my insights. It's not really like me saying as like I'm an expert per se, but it's more like, look, these are all the things I've learned. This is what I feel like has helped me. And then these are the things that I feel can help other people, right? So just sharing those insights. And then as I was putting out a couple of videos, I realized I'm connected to a lot of like very inspiring people that I can reach out to. And a lot of their stories aren't out there. And I'm sure like, you know, if someone I don't know, in India is aspiring to be a filmmaker like you, right? They would literally listen to your story and be like, hey, like, it doesn't seem like such a grandiose goal anymore. It actually seems very, very possible because they've listened to somebody's story. And, you know, just that exposure is so important for a lot of people. And I'm sure, you know, like, you know, having been to LA, going to Stanford, just being exposed to all these things, it really opens your mind to just what's possible. So for me, it's just like bringing all those like experiences, all the stories, and just trying to, you know, help people, trying to inspire people to just like the pitch usually is like inspiring people to become the best version of themselves. And that's really what it's about. Like fundamentally, it's like, you know, I'm just giving people all these insights, all these like case studies, these anecdotes to now be able to now for them to now become the best version of themselves. So yeah.
That's dope.
Yeah, and then sorry, your second part was, okay, what am I seeing this going to? Yeah, so what I'm seeing is going to, obviously I wanted to grow, I wanted to be as large as possible. I've got big goals for this thing. I like by the end of this year, I want this to be the #1 podcast in business and careers in Kenya. I think right now we're at like number 3 in business or something like that, or careers. So I want to be #1. I want to be top 10 by the end of this year. And then the next year, I wanted to be top 10 globally in careers and business. So it's like, I just wanted to really, really grow. I wanted to just have a community around it of just people just very, you know, driven to just becoming the best version at whatever they're trying to work towards achieving. You know, I envision like things like having retreats, having like networking events, you know, like just trying to build this out to the point of conferences, webinars, all these sort of things, right? So starts out with just like, you know, this podcast and just growing out this community and then just eventually it just becoming a movement or something. So yeah. I also
final question
sorry
is who's your like dream guest? If you could get anyone on the podcast like tomorrow, who would it be?
Who would it be? Oh, there's a lot of people I'd love to get. Like I'm not gonna lie, there's a lot.
Yeah.
It's hard. That's actually a hard one because I feel like if you asked me this last week, I'd have given you a different answer than this week, just because I'm so influenced. Like I'm a huge consumer of just a lot of different content. So right now, there's this guy I've been watching a lot on YouTube. It's called Bedros Keuilian. It's very, very inspiring. I'd recommend you to check him out. He's actually the one where I got the 4Fs of studying about faith, family, finances, fitness. Yeah, I got that from him. So he's someone I've actually been consuming a lot of his content lately, and it's very, very inspiring. So for me, so that's someone I'd love to actually get on the podcast to just and his story is already out there, but I would still love to just talk to him. But yeah, that's off the top of my head. That's not out of the African context. Within Africa, I'd love to get Francois on this podcast. Obviously.
That'll be sick,
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, we'll see. All in good time.
Yeah, man, for sure.
Yeah. All right, man. So, final remarks, where can people find you? And is there anything that you want to plug or promote in this episode?
Yeah, people can find me on Instagram at Musila Munuve. And anything to plug, I have a documentary I talked about, Kujichora, coming out soon. I have no exact dates when, but in the next 6 months for sure. It'll be accessible to folks. And it's a short documentary about a Black tattoo artist based in Austin. So yeah.
Awesome. And for anyone watching, I'll put all these links in the description of this video, so you can just scroll down and check Musila out. All right, so thank you everybody for joining us in this episode. Thank you to my guest, Musila Munuve. For everyone watching, this is AlphaDelta, a podcast where we really just try to motivate people to become the best version of themselves through sharing the stories of people who are operating at a higher level than most. So I've been your host, Joe Karaoke, and I'm joined again by my guest, Musila Munuve, and this is a goodbye from us. Peace.
Peace, guys.